In the village of Al-Qadar, a strange curfew was observed. Long before the sun bled below the horizon, doors were bolted and windows were shuttered. This wasn't because of thieves or bandits. It was because of answers. Yusuf returned to this village after 20 years away. The news of his father's death had finally reached him, pulling him back to a place he thought he had escaped. The house stood just as he remembered it, at the very edge of the date palm groves, a lone sentinel against the encroaching desert. The mud walls were cracked, the wooden doors swollen with decades of humidity, and a silence hung over it, all a silence that felt heavy, deliberate, as if it were holding its breath. His father had died alone. That single fact gnawed at him more than the grief itself. The first night in the old house was unsettling. As darkness settled, Yusuf heard it, a knock. It wasn't at the door or the window. It came from inside the very walls of the house. 3 slow, methodical taps. A pause. Then 3 more. He sat up in his cot, every muscle tensed. Rats, he told himself, his mind scrambling for a rational explanation. Old houses settle. They breathe. They make noises. It was a comforting lie, but it didn't last long. A voice followed the knocking. It was low, patient, and disturbingly intimate. "Yusuf, you came back late." The sound wrapped around him, a chilling caress in the dark. His blood ran cold. No one had spoken his name with that particular tone, a mix of affection and disappointment, since his mother had passed away when he was just a boy. A primal fear seized him, locking his jaw shut. He couldn't answer. He wouldn't answer. After a long, agonizing moment, the knocking stopped. The silence that returned was even more terrifying than the sound it replaced. When dawn finally broke, casting weak light through the dusty windows, Yusuf found something that erased any doubt about his sanity. Carved into the thick layer of dust on the floor, as if traced by a single, deliberate finger, were 4 words. "You always answered me before." Later that morning, the village elder paid him a visit. He was an ancient man, his eyes clouded white with cataracts, his hands gnarled like old olive branches. His voice was a dry rasp, but it only trembled when he spoke Yusuf's name. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He stood in the doorway, his blind gaze fixed on a point just beyond Yusuf. "You must not speak to it," the elder warned, his voice barely a whisper. "Speak to what?" Yusuf asked, though a part of him already knew. The elder's milky eyes shifted, turning towards the back of the house, towards the old crumbling well half hidden by overgrown weeds. "That which lives where voices fall but do not return," he said, his words heavy with ancient dread. Yusuf remembered the well. As a child, it had been his confidant. He would lean over its stone lip, the cool, damp air rising to meet him, and whisper all his secrets into its dark throat. His fears of the dark, his wishes for a new toy, his childish anger at his parents. He'd pour his heart into that abyss, and sometimes, something whispered back. It wasn't words, it was a sound, like a long, slow exhalation of breath from deep within the earth. The elder's voice pulled him from the memory. "Your father answered it," he said, a note of finality in his tone. He forgot the one rule of this place. That was his mistake. It was always his mistake. That night, the knocking returned, but it was different. It was louder, more insistent. It wasn't just in the walls anymore. It felt like it was coming from the very bones of the house. The mud brick pulsed around him, a slow, rhythmic beat, as if a giant lung was inhaling and exhaling within the structure. Then came the voice, clearer this time, filled with a strange, possessive warmth. "Yusuf," it said, "you asked for help once. I gave it." And suddenly, the memories came rushing back, unlocked from the deepest corners of his mind. He remembered the school bully who had tormented him, the boy who mysteriously fell gravely ill the day after Yusuf had cried into the well, wishing him gone. He remembered the year the rains failed, the crops withered, and his family faced starvation. He remembered kneeling at the well, begging the darkness for just one downpour. And he remembered the torrential rain that came that very night, saving the harvest. With every memory came the echo of that whisper from the depths, the sound of breath that promised, "One day, you will return the favor." Before his conscious mind could stop him, before the elder's warning could ring loud enough, his own voice betrayed him. The words tumbled out, a desperate, fearful whisper into the pulsing darkness of the room. "What do you want?" The knocking stopped. The pulsing ceased. For a single heart-stopping moment, there was only a profound, absolute silence. Then, the answer came. It wasn't from the walls or the well. It was from everywhere at once. It was inside his head and outside the house. It was in the air he breathed. "Your place." Instantly, the single lantern he had lit flickered and died, plunging the room into total blackness. A sudden, biting cold seeped up from the floorboards, and Yusuf felt the sensation of wetness spreading around his bare feet. The air thickened with the smell of a freshly dug grave, of damp soil and ancient decay. He felt a presence behind him. It wasn't touching him, but he could feel its stillness, its patient, unwavering attention. It was simply waiting. "You lived your life," the voice said again, no longer a whisper but a calm conversational statement right beside his ear. "I stayed, alone, in your words, in your well, in your house. I have been patient." With a surge of adrenaline-fueled courage, Yusuf spun around. He saw nothing. The darkness in front of him was absolute, an impenetrable void. But then, In the heart of that blackness, something blinked. A space where there was no light blinked, an impossible negation of nothingness. You promised without knowing, the voice continued, its tone maddeningly serene. Humans always do. You pour your desires into the dark and are surprised when the dark desires something in return. The next morning, the first rays of sun fell upon an empty house. The villagers, cautiously approaching, found the door ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. Yusuf was gone, but there was one change. The old well, the source of the villagers' dread, was sealed. A massive flat stone had been dragged over its opening, fitting perfectly. And carved into the stone, the letters cut deep and clean as if by an expert hand, were new words, a new warning for a new generation. Do not answer when it speaks, because some voices do not ask questions. They collect debts. Thank you for watching. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the darkness. Stay safe, and whatever you do, be careful what you whisper into the void.